Hi, Senator Cruz.
Hello. How are you
I'm
doing?
Ashley. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Welcome. You want me here?
Yes, that's perfect. All right, we get situated. I didn't get to talk to you at CPAC, but I think this is an upgrade from CPAC.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad it worked out.
First topic I wanted to talk about is one that you've been hammering the Biden administration for, and that's China.
Yeah.
And his administration, his cabinet members, you've criticized for their position on China, from Linda Thomas Greenfield to Xavier Becerra to Gina Raimondo. Can you talk a little bit specifically about why their positions on China or their history with China poses a threat?
Sure. It's very concerning because this seems to be a pattern. Nominee after nominee in the Biden administration has really questionable records on China. And this seems to be part of a pattern, a very deliberate decision to pivot back towards China and to embrace the Chinese Communist government. So you mentioned, for example, Gina Raimondo, who was just confirmed as the Commerce Secretary. She was the governor of Rhode Island. The Department of Commerce maintains what's called the entities list, which are the companies that we prohibit the transfer of U.S. technology to because they're a national security threat. There are a number of Chinese companies that are listed on that entities list. I urged the Trump administration to list those Chinese companies, and the Trump administration did so. Gina Raimondo refused to commit to leaving any of them on the entities list. She even went so far as to refuse to commit to leaving Huawei on the list. Huawei, as you know, is the giant telecom company in China that is basically an espionage agency. It masquerades as a telecom company, but it exists to install equipment across the globe that the Chinese can use to monitor communications and carry out espionage. And Raimondo refused to commit to leaving Huawei on the list. Linda Thomas Greenfield, who's Joe Biden's ambassador to the United Nations, she gave a paid speech at a Confucius Institute. Now, what is a Confucius Institute? Confucius Institutes are owned, controlled, paid for by the Chinese Communist government. They have set them up in U.S. colleges and universities all over the country. And they set them up ostensibly to study Chinese language and Chinese culture, but their real purpose is propaganda and espionage. And so the Chinese government is paying to set up these spy centers on U.S. campuses. In Congress, there has long been real bipartisan concern about these Confucius Institutes. So several years ago, I introduced legislation that restricts U.S. defense dollars from going to any university that has a Confucius Institute. And that ended up getting widespread bipartisan support, passing into law. And the result of my legislation is dozens of Confucius Institutes all over the country have shut down because the universities decided they'd rather the DoD money than the Chinese money to operate the Confucius Institute. Well, Ms. Thomas Greenfield, in October of 2019, so not a long time ago, just a little over a year ago, gave a paid speech at a Confucius Institute at a U.S. college. And not only that, if you look at the text of the speech was an ode to China, was praising China, was praising what's called their Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the Chinese government has used billions of dollars investing in infrastructure all throughout the developing world in order to make the developing world dependent on China and caught in a debt trap. And the Belt and Road Initiative is a profound threat. Linda Thomas Greenfield said America should be more like China and our policies should follow their example. That has been, as I said, a consistent pattern across this administration. I think it's really dangerous.
The Biden administration in general, his cabinet members aside, has expressed that they want to take a number of executive actions, some that they have or that they're planning to, that may actually help the Chinese Communist Party. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Well, sure. You know, we're 6 weeks into the administration, and so we still don't have a complete picture of where they're going to go and what they're going to do. That being said, what we've seen so far, if I were to sum up these first 6 weeks in 3 words, they would be boring but radical. And I don't think this is accidental. I think Joe Biden is deliberately trying to be boring. And listen, I get it. After 4 years of Donald J. Trump as president, Trump was anything but boring. He said what he thought. You never knew what he was going to say. A lot of times I'm not sure he knew what he was going to say. And I do think people got a little weary of every day what the president said or tweeted dominating the news. Do you think of the last 6 weeks? Can you remember anything Biden said for 6 weeks? I don't think that's accidental. I think they made the decision, let's not make news. Let's just fade into the background and be utterly boring and let people just go back to their lives. Now, the reason I think they're doing that deliberately is because that is a mask. It is a mask to hide a really radical agenda. You look at the cabinet nominees that Joe Biden is putting forward. These are radicals. These are extreme zealots. You look at the policies. You talked about executive orders. We haven't seen as many executive orders so far focusing on China and foreign policy. We have seen executive orders shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. On day one, you want to know what Joe Biden cares about? On day one, he destroyed 11,000 jobs. 8,000 union jobs with a stroke of a pen. Their jobs went away. You know, John Kerry, when asked about what do you say to the union worker whose job was just obliterated by Joe Biden, and Kerry said, make better choices. You know, for a centimillionaire who flies private jets to lecture all of us on the need to destroy your job for climate and don't bother me while I get back on my private jet, is Thurston Howell couldn't be more out of touch with lecturing the working men and women of this country. And that is typical of the extremism. I'll give you another example of what we've seen early on in the Biden administration. Javier Becerra, the Attorney General of California, has been nominated to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Joe Biden likes to tell us that daily. He's nominated as the head of HHS, someone who's not a medical doctor, someone who has no healthcare experience whatsoever, someone who has no scientific background whatsoever, someone who has no experience with pharmaceuticals, no experiences with virology, no experiences with logistics. We're in the middle of the largest vaccine deployment in American history, and Becerra doesn't know a thing about logistics and actually moving hundreds of millions of vaccines across the country. He's a trial lawyer. He has zero experience. If any Republican had nominated as Secretary of HHS someone with no medical experience and no scientific experience, they'd have been laughed out of the room. It's absurd. Why did Biden nominate him? Because Becerra is a leftist partisan radical. As far as I can tell, his only experience on health care is suing the Little Sisters of the Poor. I mean, he is a hard-edged partisan. And so when Joe Biden says, well, his priority is defeating the pandemic, well, why doesn't he appoint someone? You know, the Democrats like to say, follow the science, listen to the science. Well, how about have someone lead the largest cabinet agency domestically that knows something about science? And that is, it's why I say the first 6 weeks, they've been boring but radical.
So you mentioned that Biden continuously reminds the American people that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Talking about his immigration policy, in the border, even in your state of Texas, they are having border crossers come over without being tested. The Biden administration is not testing all of them for coronavirus. And moreover, they're not necessarily being held to the same protocols if they test positive as the American people are. What can Texas do to hold the Biden administration accountable for this?
Well, you know, during 4 years of the Trump administration, there was a lot of discussion about America first, which I very much agree with, that we should prioritize the American people, the American economy, our rights. If you were to characterize the Biden administration, it's not only not America first, it's America last. He treats our enemies better than he treats America and better than he treats our friends. If you look on immigration, the Democrats' policy is open borders. The immigration plan that Joe Biden has put forward is the most radical immigration plan that has ever been proffered. It is to make everyone an American citizen. Doesn't matter. Ollie, ollie, oxen free, just come on in. There are no rules. There's no testing. There's no standards. He's proposed everyone who was deported in the last 4 years is eligible to come back. Doesn't matter if you've got a criminal conviction. Doesn't matter if you're a murderer or you're a rapist. Come on in, because when you look at America, what we need is more murderers. It is asinine. You're right on COVID. He is willing to destroy your business. He is willing to destroy your job. He is willing to destroy your family. He's willing to tell you your kids can't go to school. But when it comes to illegal immigrants, they're releasing them. They're not testing them. We had over 100 illegal immigrants released who tested positive for COVID. And it is because the Democrats' approach to this virus, everything's political, and their partisan ideology trumps everything. Look, we see it in the debates over masks and restrictions. Listen, I think the virus is serious. I think we should treat it seriously. I think we should take reasonable precautions to keep people safe. Things like social distancing, I think, make sense. What doesn't make sense is shutting down businesses, shutting down schools, destroying livelihoods. But you see the hypocrisy of the left when, for example, you have Democratic governors and Democratic mayors who are shutting down churches, but protests are fine. If you're a leftist protest, you can have no mask, you can be screaming in someone's face, and no virus will be transmitted. But if you go to church and you sing a hymn, clearly that is a threat to public health and must be stopped. And it's evident to anyone looking at this that that's not science. That's ideology. That's politics. And so when it comes to immigration, Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security just a few days ago said there is no crisis at the border. We're seeing a massive surge in illegal immigration. More and more people are coming illegally, and they're coming for a reason. They're coming because they're being told, hey, you can stay. Catch and release is back. And not only that, we are particularly tragically seeing a dramatic spike in unaccompanied children. Now, you and I both remember all 4 years of the Trump administration, the news media daily intoned kids in cages. Number one, those cages, which I have visited many times, many of them are in my state of Texas, they were built by Barack Obama. They were built by Barack Obama because there was a massive surge in unaccompanied kids coming in because of Obama's amnesty. This all started with DACA. When he granted amnesty to people who come as kids, the natural cause and effect is we saw the number of kids skyrocket. It went from 6,000 to over 90,000. That's what Obama did. And when you go to these facilities where the kids are in cages, built by Obama, that I visited during the Obama administration, that the press refused to cover, what you see are little boys and little girls that have been handed over to human traffickers. And these human traffickers, they're not well-meaning social workers. They're not wearing Birkenstocks and hugging the kids. They are vicious transnational criminals. These children are being physically assaulted. They're being sexually assaulted. And we're seeing the same thing happen under Joe Biden. The numbers of kids coming are rising again because of the same reason. When you promise them amnesty, they will come. And so they're having to reopen and expand the detention facilities for kids. And suddenly the kids in cages now, apparently, they're humane treatment centers. And it reveals, number one, the utter hypocrisy of the media. But number two, the heartlessness of the Democratic policies. Let me tell you, having visited these facilities, having seen these kids, you are not being compassionate and you're not being humane if you're adopting policies that is resulting in little boys and little girls in the care and custody of human traffickers who are vicious, abusive, and harmful. You are hurting those children. And the Democrats putting these policies in place, they don't give a damn.
So let me ask you about the Democrats in Texas in general.
Yeah.
So your state went for Donald Trump in the last election, but some people pointed to Texas as potentially following the pattern of Arizona or Georgia and shifting a little bit leftward.
Yeah.
As far as that happening in the future, are you concerned about that for Texas's future?
Absolutely. Look, Texas is a battleground. We are growing like crazy. We are seeing people move from all over the country. into Texas. We're seeing a massive influx of people coming from California into Texas. We're seeing people come from New York into Texas. They're fleeing bad policies. But a lot of folks in Texas are worried that they come here and vote for the same policies that destroyed the state they're leaving. There's also, demographically, there are two broad trends that are playing out across the country. On the one hand, working class voters are moving right. Today's Democratic Party has abandoned working class voters. You know, it used to be the Democrats, the party of FDR was the party of union members and working men and women. The old line was the Republicans are the party of the rich and Democrats are the party of the poor. That's been inverted. Now, today's Democrats are the party of wealthy coastal elites. They are the party of the rich. That's who they serve, that's who they represent. And from their perspective, the dirty, stinking deplorables, the truck drivers, the steel workers, the construction workers, the cops and firefighters, the waiters and waitresses, the men and women who've got calluses on their hands, the kind of people whose jobs Joe Biden destroyed when he shut down the Keystone Pipeline, they view them as deplorables, or as Joe Biden said yesterday, as Neanderthals. They look down on them. Working class voters are moving steadily right. But at the same time, suburban voters, and in particular suburban women, are moving left. That is moving more suburban states. So the result of the first trend is we're seeing states like Ohio becoming significantly more Republican. It's got a very large working class population in Ohio. That's a positive trend. But other states, like Georgia, like Arizona, like Texas, are massive suburban states. They have huge suburban populations. You look at Texas, we have 3 of the 10 biggest cities in America. We have 4 of the 11 biggest cities in America. 29 million people in the state of Texas. Half of the population in Texas is in either Houston or DFW. Fully 50% of the population. If you add in San Antonio and Austin, you get to about 68% of the population. So we've got massive suburbs. Texas, historically, the cities were bright blue, but they were surrounded by these giant red donuts of the suburbs that were solidly Republican. What has happened in the last couple of elections is the suburbs have turned purple. They're not blue, but they're purple. How those two vectors intersect is going to determine elections going forward. Now, all of that being said, I think 22 and 24 are going to be very, very good elections. And the reason is simple. The Democrats are overshooting. These guys are extreme, they're radical, their policies don't work. And there's a natural pendulum to politics. As Biden and Schumer and Pelosi ram through a dangerous and radical agenda, I think a lot of Americans are going to go, what? That doesn't make any sense. That's crazy. And I think the pendulum will come back in the direction of sanity. And that's going to result in 22 and 24, I hope and believe, being very good elections.
I have to bring it up, but Cancun, you made some headlines recently for being spotted in the airport headed to Cancun. You've said you regretted it. You were able to make light of it on the CPAC stage. As far as the optics go, you had the Democrats and pundits and the media pointing to the optics being poor. Are you concerned at all that trip could hurt you politically?
No. Look, we had 2 nasty snowstorms hit the state of Texas. It was rough. The state got hit hard. One of the great things about Texas, we don't get that very often. I like to say you can't shovel sunshine, and that's very true. It's one of the reasons we live in Texas. When that happened, our power grid went down, and 4 million Texans lost power. Heidi and I were among them. We lost power at our house. We had no heat. We ended up losing hot water and then all the water at our house. So we spent a couple of days without power, and we were with our family. I was on my cell phone and working remotely, but our daughters came to us and said, let's get out of here. Let's get somewhere warm where there's power. And we said yes. We were being parents. We were taking care of our kids. So we said yes, and we took them to the beach. What followed from that was truly ridiculous. We saw Democrats and the media lose their minds. It was, if I had stolen nuclear secrets and delivered them to Beijing, I don't think it would have gotten the coverage that the fact that I took my kids to the beach did. And listen, was it a mistake? Sure, because I gave ammunition to the knuckleheads. The people who frankly hate me and hate you and hate Trump and hate conservatives and want to destroy us all, they used it as an opportunity to lose their minds. Now, look, with the power down, frankly, what I was doing, it's not like I'm going to get up on a power line and repair the power lines. I don't know how to fix your busted pipe. I'm a lawyer. That's not what my skill set is. Frankly, what I was doing before and after was mostly on the phone with various state and local leaders. That you can do anywhere. I mean, we've all been working remotely for a year. That you can do as easily in a place with power as you can in a place without. And so the substantive criticism is not real, but this is all a political game. This is all people trying to manufacture reasons to attack their political enemies. By the way, it was interesting, the contrast. We're watching the Andrew Cuomo regime crumble. Crumble, number one, as multiple allegations of sexual harassment are being raised now. Multiple women have come forth with those complaints. But number two, Andrew Cuomo's policies, he deliberately sent COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. That policy resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of seniors. Now, look, do I think he did so deliberately and maliciously? No, he didn't want those people to die. But it was a staggeringly stupid policy. It wasn't just slightly wrong, it was shockingly wrong. And then what happened afterwards, he did do deliberately, which is the state of New York lied about it. They covered it up. They suppressed the numbers. One of his senior aides has admitted now that they lied, trying to prevent the Department of Justice from investigating. It really was striking. You have a Democrat who was being lionized just a few months ago as the savior of COVID, who made catastrophic mistakes that resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of seniors and then lied about it and covered it up. And you had me, who took my kids to the beach. Clearly, the latter is the much bigger story and much greater consequence. The press.
I saw the Politico headline. They said that your Cancun trip is what brought political scandals back rather than Cuomo's nursing home policy.
Well, it's right, because they won't cover the other. One of the greatest aspects of the age of Trump is it has made the press naked and afraid. 5 years ago, the mainstream media pretended they were fair, that they pretended they were impartial, they pretended they were journalists. They don't do that anymore. Look, CNN is a laughingstock because they are political propagandists. They put on their hat. They are rooting for Joe Biden. They are rooting for amnesty. They're rooting for higher taxes. They are rooting for Pelosi. They are rooting for Schumer. They are rooting for Cuomo. They hate Trump. They hate conservatives. They hate deplorables. They want to drive all of us out of existence. They want to silence us. They want to cancel us. The press doesn't hide this. That's what they do. I also think they're suffering from Trump withdrawal, where every day the press poured hatred and venom directed at President Trump. And it was like heroin in their bloodstream. They had to wake up and get their shot of Trump hatred. And now that Trump is no longer president, I think they don't know what to do. And so all of that hatred and venom, it's got to be directed somewhere. And so they're directing it at anyone on the right they can to try to destroy them. But ultimately, it's the American people that they hate. It's this country is and remains a center-right country. We believe in low taxes. We believe in low regulations. We believe in lots of jobs. We believe in the Constitution and Bill of Rights, free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment. The press hates that the American people believe that. We want our borders secure. We support the police. The press hates that we believe that. And so they're trying to gaslight us. They're trying to lie to us. And they're trying to convince the conservative at home, you're the only one. Look, these numbskulls are trying to cancel Dr. Seuss. Like, you got to be friggin' kidding me. It's gotten to the point, how do you even make fun of them anymore? When Dr. Seuss is deemed too dangerous and radical, you know the lunatics are running the asylum. And the good news is the American people have the common sense to recognize that.